Jammers, Crazcatlover here, back with another episode of Crazcat Chats. Today's episode is about art tips and tricks submitted by viewers like you. Thank you! Anyways, if you notice that the audio quality in this video is better than usual, that's because I'm using a different microphone and I'm actually bothering to edit my audio quality for once. And we'll see how that goes. If this is actually better quality audio than my usual videos, I'll keep on doing it in the future. And so yeah, back to the video. So recently on my blog, thecrazcatblog.blogspot.com, I asked my viewers to submit some of their art, some art tips, as well as something they would like some art tips about. And I got quite a few submissions. So many, in fact, that this will have to be split into 2 separate episodes so that it won't be like half an hour long. Anyways, in this episode, I'm going to be sharing about half of the submitted drawings and tips, as well as some drawings and tips of my own. I would like to note that I did have to edit the submitted tips just a bit for grammar, as well as for time, and all that aside, let's get on with the video. This first drawing was submitted by my good friend Purple Star Club, and about it, she says, "The animal in this drawing is a fox, which I always have a hard time drawing. The face is so hard to capture when you're drawing a fox." And I'd just like to note that I also struggled greatly with drawing foxes for quite a while. When I started drawing Animal Jam art, most people would ask me to draw their wolf or Arctic wolf, so I basically just drew a lot of wolves, and whenever I had to draw something besides a wolf, I had a very hard time. Here's an example. This drawing is from July 2016, so exactly 1 year ago. As you can see, it looks kinda more like a cat than a fox, and the reason why is because I didn't use reference photographs, I just looked at the Animal Jam avatar for reference. Purple Star Club goes on to mention this, saying, "And so I used a reference photograph. It's still not the best fox someone could draw, but at least it's better than what I usually do when I draw foxes by just looking at Animal Jam pictures. So yeah, using references is really helpful, and it's not copying. Some artists use that as an excuse to get away from using reference photographs. And seriously, yes, using reference photographs is not copying. You really should try it. It's super helpful, and it's really helped me learn how to draw humans a lot better. I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to find when I started using reference photographs for drawing Animal Jam animals as people. It's kind of a drastic difference if you look through my old art. And anyways, moving on to Purple Star Club's second submission, a drawing of her wolf. About this drawing, she says, "This drawing has quite a lot of anatomical problems, but that's because I didn't use a reference in this one. The main mistake I see that I made in this drawing was the usage of shadows and lighting in the wrong places. Shadows are quite hard to get right. Can you give some tips on how you shade drawings?" Shading and highlighting can be pretty difficult, but here's a simple tip for getting basic highlights and shadows in the right places. Indicate where the light source is and use that as a guide for placing the lighting. I put together a quick example with a 5-minute sketch, and hopefully that helps. This is just some quick advice, and you can find plenty of videos entirely about shading that go into much more depth. Moving on to a submission from my friend Lost Fairy, here's what she said. "What I have a hard time with is drawing deer. It's kinda hard with drawing clothes on them, plus I wanted the deer to look cutesy, and that was an interesting challenge." Again, I cannot stress how important reference photographs are. Even if you're drawing a cartoon, finding a reference of whatever you're trying to draw is really great to get the anatomy right, especially for beginner artists. And also, starting with basic shapes rather than the entire drawing is really important. Here's another example with that quick sketch to show what I mean. It's really important to figure out what the basic shapes that make up what you want to draw are, and to use those to draw the drawing. And yeah, you can find a ton of tutorials all about that here on YouTube. Anyways, Lost Fairy also has some advice about shading. What I did have an easy time with is the colors. It's good to mix around colors. Plus, it's nice to blend colors to make a new color. Like, if you want an orange color for hair, but you don't want it to be too bright, you can mix brown with it. Or for shading, if you have a dark color, you can add some black colored pencil to the area you want shaded, and it gives a nice dark area. Good advice, it's always good to mix colors rather than just using the basic colors provided. A lot of colors aren't necessary to make good art if you know how to mix them. And yeah, onto a submission from my friend Fuzzy Berry Claws 1, who actually submitted 4 drawings. And yeah, this is the first drawing she submitted, and about it she says, "I made this drawing as a request for a buddy, but the elf tail looks awful. I always have trouble drawing elf tail armors, and the circles or gems on them always look too big, and I feel like I place too much of them. I would love some tips, or would like to know if you know how to draw them." I totally feel the same way. I do not like to draw elf tail armor. One tip I have for you is to envision how the armor looks in a 3-dimensional shape. It has 4 movable sections and each section has 2 gems at the top. I think your problem is, rather than drawing too many of the gems, the placement of the gems is just a little bit off, and I think that's what's getting you. Here's an edit of where I personally would place the gems in this drawing. And I suggest that you sketch some elf tail armors from a couple of different angles, and that should really help you figure out how to draw them. Here's the next drawing Fuzzy submitted, and about it she says, I have noticed that this head feather looks a bit too big for the fox's head. The head feather is not meant to be a headband, but I think it looks like one by the way it squeezes the head. So I would like to redraw the head feather to make it just sit on top of the head instead of making it squeeze on the head like a headband. That's definitely something to consider next time you draw an animal wearing a head feather. We learn from our mistakes, and it sounds like you know exactly what to do next time you draw a head feather. Onwards to the next submission! The ears I draw usually look like this. I often have trouble drawing ears when the animal is wearing a hat, because after drawing I feel like the hat should be covering the ears slightly, or the ears should be down, but I always have trouble with hats and ears, so any tips on that would be great. Look up photographs of dogs wearing hats. People often dress up their dogs in costumes, so you'll find plenty of references. If the hat doesn't have holes for the ears to go into, I would imagine that the ears would be kind of smushed by the hat, and therefore would be down. But if the hat does have holes for the ears would fit through those holes and be visible, and therefore would be in any number of positions depending on the emotion you want the animal to be expressing. And yeah, here's the last submission from Fuzzy Berry Claws 1, and about it she says, I do like to use references sometimes, so I would looked up wolf sitting just to understand and know what I should be aiming to draw. The shading in this piece is way more noticeable, however, I still don't like the fact that I placed the shading basically anywhere. I've already mentioned some tips for shading in this video, and hopefully that will help you out, Fuzzy. Anyways, continuing on. I like to draw the Animal Jam clothing on my animals, and I want them to look like the real Animal Jam items, as you can see with the antlers and elf bracelets. But the one item I want to look different is the Jamaliday scarf. I used to make the scarves look like the Animal Jam scarf, but recently decided to draw my own style of scarf. I often like to draw them blowing in the wind and such. So, any tips on drawing Animal Jam items in your own styles? My personal way of trying to draw Animal Jam items in my own style is usually to look up photographs of real-life versions of that item, or the closest I can get to it, find some photographs that I like, and use them as a reference to draw the Animal Jam item instead of just using a screenshot of the item as a reference. Usually when drawing Animal Jam animals as actual animals, I draw items pretty much the same as they appear in Animal Jam, but when I draw Animal Jam animals as humans, I will often change items up very much, since animals and humans are pretty different. So an example of that is like turning elf bracelets into boots, but I do keep some aspects of the item the same, like by adding the little fleur-de-lis, however you pronounce that, from the elf bracelets on the boots. When you're figuring out your own unique style, try practicing drawing things in a couple of various ways and incorporate the aspects of those that you like the most into your art. And yeah, that's all for this episode. I have a few more submissions for this, but I don't want this video to be super duper long, so I'll make a part 2 later. Once I have made and posted the next part of this series, I'll put a link to that video in the description down below. I'll try to make the next episode about a week from now, but until then, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure that you subscribe to my channel, and slap that like button! Make sure to check out my kid-friendly Animal Jam blog, thecrazcatblog.blogspot.com, for all of my Animal Jam art, videos, and more Animal Jam randomness. This is Crazcatlover, signing out. Peace!